Jeff Boggs here. This week in our Peterborough mini lecture, I'm going to talk about Beechwood Resort. This is the normal base of operations for our 3P56 and 3P57 students in their third year as they conduct field work either in Peterborough or in the surrounding area. Nestled in the heart of the Kawartha Lakes cottage country, so that would be kind of over in this area. If you can see the cursor, so kind of over in here. Beechwood Resorts, which is sort of that area there. That little knob, or that little pointy bit there, fronts 426 meters of the shoreline on the lower Buckhorn Lake, which is kind of this lake right here. Not that you can see it, but right about there, where this red dot I'm drawing is, that little bit there, that is the Wolf's Island Provincial Park. And then, what do we know? Okay, so Beechwood Resort, for decades, the geography department used it as a place to house students during their mandatory field course. And more recently, with the merger of geography and tourism studies students have come along as well, given that it is an area renowned for tourism in Ontario. Initially, when we used to send students here, this was basically when I was born, like back in 68 or 69 when this began, that the geography department would send students there to Beechwood Resort at the end of August. And we always noted that it was sort of a problem to send your students off to collect data before the semester began, because even though students would be given materials to prepare or to make use of to write a proposal when they got to Beechwood Resort, and then either did their work out in the natural environment or in the urban environment, that students typically were perhaps not as prepared as we might hope that they would be. And then about 5-6 years ago, Brock University instituted Reading Week in the fall. And that allowed us to then make use of the Tuesday to, I believe, Friday of a reading week to send students to the Beechwood Resort. And from there, they would commence their field exercises and data collection. And this meant that students now had about 5 or 6 weeks to prepare in a controlled environment, that is the classroom, before they went out into the field. My understanding is that this works out a lot better than the old way. Okay, so here what we have is a satellite image. So Beechwood Resort is kind of up here, where that little point is, thanks to Google Maps. Peterborough is located over here. It's actually this kind of this square area there. And one of the things that you will note when you look at this map is that, if I can draw it, that roughly speaking, kind of like that, and actually we might even do it over there, get rid of this. So the areas kind of roughly like that, I guess maybe a bit more like that. So everything below this is an area which, when the ice sheets were retreating, were the locations that received all of the glacial deposition. Whereas the areas above that were areas that were scraped clear, and by the time the ice sheets melted back, retreated from this, they by and large had already dumped all of their till. And so again, I think we talked about this about 2 weeks ago, Peterborough and the surrounding area is interesting for physical geographers because it allows you to rapidly move from down here to up here and see fairly rapid changes in the landscape due to glaciation. But it's also interesting for tourism studies students and human geographers because these lakes in Peterborough's economy are kind of intertwined through in that Peterborough's one of the largest cities, kind of is the largest city in this area. So if people need something that's sort of specialized and they're staying at a cabin, they'll drive into Peterborough, right? Peterborough also has a history of manufacturing and is a somewhat important transportation line as well, if we think in terms of the Trent Severn waterway. I think that's all I'm going to say about this. Oh, and then below this line, so kind of down in this area, you'll notice that it is generally more densely settled. And this is also the area that has more agriculture because the soils tend to be better. Whereas up here, soils had to form basically after the ice sheets retreated. Whereas here, you had a lot of material sort of below this line. You had lots of material that was dumped that was already usable as soils or could quickly be, geologically speaking, converted over into soils. And so when you look at this satellite image, you'll also notice there's often little rectangular coloration. So like over here, it looks a little bit brown or green, and you'll see what look like very faint lines. So these reflect the roads and the property boundaries of this area. Okay, that's all I'm going to say here. In past years, when geography and tourism students have stayed at Beechwood Resort, you'll initially go there, I believe, on a Tuesday, and so it's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, and you will then be allocated, depending on your wishes, to either like the main resort building or to a cabin. You'll have to share your room or your cabin with somebody else, generally speaking. I'm not sure what the co-ed situation is like, though I imagine that they generally, as a rule, don't allow it, at least from our perspective, as prudish as that might seem. And so each day you'll return to Beechwood Resort after that, so on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and you will discuss your data collection experience when you get back. When you have free time, to the degree that you have free time, you will then be able to experience some of the amenities that are available at Beechwood Resort. Given that it will be early October, I'm not sure if any but the most cold adapted people will want to swim in the lake, but you never know. Sometimes people will take boats out, sit around campfires. And for those of you who, like me, have never been cottaging, this field course allows you to sample the cottaging experience. At least if you stay in the dorm or stay in the cottages and not in the main dorms. So they feed you as well. So if you are really interested in food, you may decide that you want to stay in the dorm because you'll have a shorter trip down to the commissary or the kitchen area. Anyway, not only will you be fed breakfast and supper, but you can swim, sunbathe, and sit around a campfire, weather permitting. And so Beechwood Resort provides not only your base of operations each night, but it is also emblematic of the larger tourist economy operating around the Kawartha Lakes. It has not only dormitories, again, akin to those that you might experience in a youth hostel, if anybody's ever stayed in a youth hostel, but they also have individual cabins, and they're situated along the lower Buckhorn Lake shoreline. For this week, this is then the whole enchilada. So I don't have anything else to say about Beechwood Resort except that we're happy that they give us a deal and have for many decades, and we hope to keep using them in the future. Alrighty. Goodbye.